Loved his daughter. He loved me, but you couldn't say anything about him to his daughter. I know that he was a great father, a great person, a great man overall, and he did what he could with what he had.
Literally, my granny's someone so loved. She's so loved, and it just hurts to see that she was gone like this. Really, what happened? It's just really lost for words. Nobody can prepare for another family member to go around
A whole
massacring the rest of your family member.
She decided what she.
Imagine waking up one morning and realizing someone in your family has disappeared. You call her. No answer. You send messages. Nothing. Days pass, and something doesn't feel right. So members of the family begin looking for her themselves. But what they don't know is that finding their missing relative is about to lead them directly into something far more terrifying. Because according to prosecutors, by the time this nightmare was over, 5 members of one East St. Louis family would be dead, 2 others would be wounded, and the 2 people police would eventually arrest were only 15 and 16 years old. Even more disturbing, one of those teenagers was a member of the very family being targeted. But this story does not begin at the park where the final shootings happened. It doesn't even begin on the day police made the arrests. It begins several days earlier with a woman named Sheree May. And investigators say that for days, her relatives had no idea what had already happened. Stay with me, because when police eventually stopped the suspects, what prosecutors say officers discovered inside their vehicle turned an already shocking murder investigation into something almost impossible to comprehend. Before we continue, remember that this case is still moving through the courts. The defendants are presumed innocent unless proven guilty. And several details discussed in this video come from prosecutors' allegations, charging documents, law enforcement statements, and publicly reported court proceedings. Sheree May was 49 years old and lived in East St. Louis, Illinois. According to investigators, Sheree was killed sometime between July 5th and July 7th, 2026. But at first, her death wasn't known to the rest of the family. There wasn't immediately a massive police response. There weren't television cameras surrounding multiple crime scenes. There weren't reporters trying to understand how so many members of one family could be attacked. At first, there was simply a woman relatives apparently could not reach. And that detail becomes incredibly important because according to prosecutors, Sheree's death wasn't the ending of this case. It was the beginning. Prosecutors allege Sheree was attacked inside her apartment at the Samuel Gompers homes. Authorities would later say she suffered gunshot and
put out and that he wanted them to give him a place. She wanted them to let him stay with them or whatever. And now they can't be together. Only one day maybe when they go to court. So I can see those children crying and weeping and screaming every day because they've done something this foolish. Reality has kicked in. People, please, train up your children. I know they've been trained good. But a lot of times they get influenced by other children or whatever the case may be. This
wounds. Her body was allegedly concealed and eventually left behind a building at the housing complex. For days, investigators...
They took them to Jones Park and they fired off in the vehicle, hitting my wife 4 times, killing Quentin and Shania Thompson, and shooting my auntie in the face, trying to kill her, but they had no more bullets together. So they wanted to eliminate everybody that had a problem with the situation.
Say Sheree's relatives didn't know exactly what had happened to her, and that created a devastating chain reaction. Because eventually, people who loved Sheree started asking questions. Where was she? Why wasn't she answering? Why hadn't anyone heard from her? And 2 relatives decided to go looking for answers. One of them was Sheree's 24-year-old son, Devin May. The other was 74-year-old Patricia May, the family's grandmother and matriarch. They reportedly went to Sheree's residence because they could not reach her. They thought they were checking on someone they loved. According to prosecutors, they were walking directly into the next stage of the nightmare. Think about this from Devin's perspective. Your mother isn't responding. something feels wrong. You go to her apartment. Maybe you're expecting to discover she's sick. Maybe her phone is broken. Maybe there's some innocent explanation. But prosecutors say that when Devin arrived, the teenagers accused in this case were still dealing with what had happened to Sheree. According to statements presented in court, Devin entered unexpectedly while the suspects were allegedly cleaning inside the apartment, and prosecutors say he was shot and killed. Devin was only 24. He had gone there looking for his mother. Instead, according to the state's allegations, he became the second member of his family to die. But Patricia May was also there. And what prosecutors allege happened next is one of the most disturbing parts of this entire case. According to the prosecution's account, Patricia was waiting outside. The 15-year-old girl allegedly went to get her grandmother and brought her into the apartment. Prosecutors say Jothimer Davis, the girl's 16-year-old boyfriend, was hiding inside. When Patricia entered, Davis allegedly emerged and shot her. 3 relatives were now dead: Sheree, her son Devin, and Patricia, the 74-year-old family matriarch. But investigators say something else happened after Patricia's death, something police wouldn't fully discover until later. Charging documents accused Davis of severing Patricia's right thumb. Prosecutors allege that the thumb was intended to be used to gain access to her iPhone. Investigators have not publicly explained everything the suspects may allegedly have wanted from the phone. At Davis's detention hearing, prosecutors also said money had been mentioned when Patricia's death was discussed. But again, these remain allegations that must be tested in court, and the violence was still not over.
Different locations, different times.
Because they're all related, and because of the definition of what a mass shooting is, and also the proximity, but because of one common connection and the way this is unplayed, it may be appropriate to characterize it as a mass shooting.
Then came Sunday, July 12, 2026. This is the day the separate pieces of the case began crashing together. According to Illinois State Police, investigators eventually connected shootings at 3 different locations in the East St. Louis area. But police didn't immediately know they were dealing with one enormous family tragedy. That morning, officers discovered Sheree May's remains. Investigators began processing the scene. Then another emergency call came in. 3 people were reportedly down, and suddenly, police were no longer investigating one suspicious death. They were racing into a much larger situation. One of the locations was Jones Park. According to authorities, 21-year-old Quentin Thompson was killed there. 2 women, Tiffany Thompson and Santosha Scott, were also shot but survived. Tiffany was the mother of the 15-year-old suspect. Quentin was her brother. Santosha was her cousin. That means that, according to authorities, the teenager's own immediate and extended family had now become victims. Elsewhere in East St. Louis, investigators found yet another member of the family, 25-year-old Shania Thompson. Shania was also the teenage suspect's sibling. Authorities said Shania had been shot and was found near the area of 39th Street and Summit Avenue. By the end of the violence, 5 people were dead: Sheree May, 49, Patricia May, 74, Devin May, 24, Quentin Thompson, 21, and Shania Thompson, 25. 2 others had survived serious gunshot wounds. This wasn't one argument that suddenly exploded. According to the prosecution's timeline, the deaths had unfolded across several days. That was one of the details that made investigators describe the case as a targeted attack on one family. And naturally, one question immediately took over the entire case. Why? How could 2 teenagers allegedly become involved in violence against so many members of one family? And this is where we have to separate confirmed information from family claims, theories, and allegations. Authorities have not publicly established one complete motive for all of the killings. Court documents did not originally identify a single motive. However, members of the family have spoken publicly about tensions surrounding the relationship between the 15-year-old girl and Davis. The girl's father, Marcus May, told reporters that his daughter had become angry with relatives and had allegedly plotted with Davis. Other relatives have said they believed members of the family opposed the teenage relationship. There were also reported problems at home involving schooling and previous conflict. But those accounts are not the same thing as a motive proven in court. What prosecutors say they do have, however, are messages. At Davis's detention hearing, prosecutors described social media conversations allegedly exchanged between the two teenagers. According to prosecutors, those messages included discussions about Sheree's body and about killing additional members of the girl's family. One message attributed to the girl suggested she understood that her decisions could cost her relationship with her entire family. Prosecutors presented those conversations as evidence that the violence was planned. The defense rejects that interpretation, and that disagreement is going to matter enormously as this case continues. Davis's attorney has argued that prosecutors are telling the story incorrectly. His defense attorney suggested that Davis was actually being threatened by members of the family and raised a self-defense theory. So we have two radically different versions beginning to emerge. Prosecutors portray a planned campaign targeting relatives. The defense says the full truth is more complicated. Ultimately, a jury, not social media, not YouTube, and not public opinion, will have to decide what the evidence proves. Now return to Jones Park, because according to authorities, this is where the case reached another terrifying turning point. Tiffany Thompson and Santosha Scott had survived being shot. Quentin Thompson had been killed, and prosecutors allege that after the park shooting, Davis took Scott's SUV by force. He is charged with aggravated vehicular hijacking in connection with that allegation. Police now had multiple victims, multiple scenes, and suspects who were apparently on the move. But investigators were beginning to understand that these weren't random shootings scattered across East St. Louis. They were connected. The victims were connected, and the target appeared to be one family. Then police began closing in on the teenagers. Investigators tracked the vehicle to Frank Holton State Park. Illinois State police officers moved to stop it. Police eventually used a pit maneuver to force the vehicle to stop. The car was disabled, and the two teenagers were taken into custody. After days of alleged violence, police finally had both suspects. But what prosecutors say investigators discovered after that arrest would become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the entire case. During a later court hearing, prosecutors revealed that investigators discovered a severed human thumb inside the vehicle. Police reportedly asked the teenagers who it belonged to. Prosecutors say the 15-year-old identified it as belonging to her grandmother, Patricia. Charging documents accused Davis of removing Patricia's right thumb after she died. The prosecution says it was connected to attempts to unlock Patricia's iPhone. That allegation resulted in Davis facing a charge of dismembering a human body in addition to the murder charges. And suddenly investigators had more than two suspects. They had a vehicle, they had physical evidence, they had multiple crime scenes, they had a stolen firearm investigation. They reportedly had electronic messages, they had surviving witnesses, and they had statements allegedly made after the arrests. Piece by piece, authorities began constructing their timeline. And here's another detail that had actually emerged before the final shootings. Prosecutors say the gun allegedly used in the attacks belonged to Tiffany Thompson, the mother of the 15-year-old. According to testimony reported from the detention hearing, Tiffany had reported the firearm missing to East St. Louis police on July 7th. She reportedly told police she believed her daughter had taken it. That was days before the final wave of shootings on July 12th. Cases like this can easily become dominated by the suspects. Their ages, their messages, their possible motive, their arrests, their court appearances. But there's a danger in telling a story that way, because 5 human beings can slowly become nothing more than names in a headline. So remember who was lost. Patricia May was 74 and was described by relatives as the family's matriarch. Sheree May was 49. Her disappearance was one of the events that ultimately led family members looking for answers. Devin May was 24. Prosecutors say he went looking for his mother and walked into a situation he could never have expected. Shania Thompson was 25. Quentin Thompson was only 21. And two more relatives, Tiffany Thompson and Santosha Scott, survived. Think about what survival means in a case like this. You don't simply leave a hospital and return to normal life. There are physical wounds, there are funerals, there are empty chairs, there are birthdays that will never feel the same. And there is the unbelievable reality that the person accused of helping cause that destruction is part of the same family. One relative summed up the family's pain with a simple question: why? And even now, that question has not been completely answered. On July 14th, prosecutors announced charges. Because Jaimer Davis was 16 and charged with first-degree murder, his case moved into adult criminal court under Illinois law. He faces multiple charges, including 5 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated battery, a charge involving the alleged dismemberment of Patricia May's body, aggravated vehicular hijacking, and a charge involving the alleged use of a stolen firearm. The 15-year-old girl was charged through the juvenile system. Prosecutors said they intended to seek permission to transfer her case into adult criminal court. Because her case began in juvenile court, authorities did not publicly identify her. At Davis's detention hearing, his lawyers challenged the prosecution's narrative. The judge ultimately ordered Davis held while the case continues. No conviction has occurred. These are allegations. Evidence will still have to be presented, challenged, and tested. Witnesses can be cross-examined. Forensic evidence can be examined. Statements can be disputed. And the defense will have the opportunity to present its version of events. That's important, because true crime audiences often see a headline, hear an allegation, and immediately treat the case as finished. Legally, this case is nowhere near finished. Maybe the most frightening thing about the East St. Louis case isn't simply the number of victims, it's the timeline. According to prosecutors, this wasn't over in seconds. One relative was allegedly killed days before the others. Then family members began searching for her. That search allegedly led more relatives into danger. Then the violence moved somewhere else. Then somewhere else again. Until police were eventually dealing with multiple scenes across the city. It's the idea that while one part of this family was wondering where Sheree was, something far darker may already have been unfolding around them. And perhaps that's also why this case has affected so many people beyond East St. Louis. Because families argue, teenagers rebel, parents disagree with relationships, people fight about school, money, rules, and independence. Those things happen inside millions of homes. But almost no one imagines that an ordinary family conflict could ever be followed by allegations this extreme. And we still do not know exactly what a trial will ultimately reveal. Were the killings primarily connected to conflict over the teenage relationship, as some relatives believe? Did money play a significant role in Patricia May's death? What exactly was on her phone? What will investigators recover from the suspect's devices? What will the surviving victims say? How will the defense explain shootings spread across several locations and days? And what additional evidence hasn't yet been made public? Those questions may become crucial as the case moves through the courts. For now, 5 members of one family are gone. 2 others survived. A 16-year-old is facing adult murder charges. A 15-year-old is facing murder allegations through the juvenile system while prosecutors seek an adult transfer. And one East St. Louis family is left trying to understand how so many lives disappeared in such a short period of time. The story began with people wondering where one woman had gone. By the time police found the answer, they were investigating one of the most devastating family tragedies East St. Louis had seen. And perhaps the saddest part is this. For the surviving family members, there may never be an explanation that makes what happened understandable. Because whatever evidence eventually comes out in court, 5 people are never coming home. May Patricia May, Sheree May, Devin May, Quentin Thompson, and Shania Thompson be remembered for the lives they lived, not simply for the horrific circumstances surrounding their deaths. Our thoughts remain with their surviving relatives and loved ones. And as this case continues, remember, Charges are accusations. Both defendants are entitled to due process, and the complete truth must be determined through the courts. But before you leave, I want to know your thoughts. What do you believe will become the most important evidence at trial? The alleged messages, the surviving witnesses, the firearm evidence, the suspect's statements, or the digital evidence from the phones? Let me know respectfully in the comments. And follow Crime on Pulse for more carefully researched true crime stories and major updates as this case develops.